Hey love bugs, welcome back to another true crime video. Today's case is pretty heavy, so proceed with caution, I should say. Yeah, this is not a very widely covered case. This is about the cross-country killer, not the one that you're thinking about, not the Greyhound, it's not the Greyhound. There was another cross-country killer, but this is not him. This is somebody completely different. This is somebody you probably have never heard of before. So if you're the happy face killer, this is not him. This is the cross-country killer, even though the happy face killer was, or was it the smiley face killer? Or was it the lipstick killer? I'm kind of embarrassed that I know all of these nicknames, but it's not any of them. This is the cross-country killer, not the lipstick killer, not the smiley face killer, not the lipstick killer, none of them. This is Tommy Lynn Sells, the cross-country killer. So let's get into it. Hi everyone, welcome back to another true crime video. This case is a little heavy, so I'm just gonna jump right into it. But before I do, I just want to give some content warnings. This case does contain crimes against children. I don't honestly look. I'm not about to sit here and sugarcoat this case. It's awful. It's terrible. So all I can say is watch it at your own risk. Like, if you do not want to hear about crimes against children, rape, sodomy, or anything of that nature, I am not trying to trigger anybody with this video. So just please don't watch it. I'm being so for real. Like, this case is terrible. So without further ado, we just gonna go ahead and get right into it. Per usual, all of the products I will be using are gonna be listed down below in the description box. Today's case, you have probably never heard of this man before, and honestly, up until I started doing the research on this case, I had never heard of this man before either. But he is known as the cross-country killer. Tommy Lynn Sells was born on June 28th of 1964, making him a Cancer. He was born to his mother Nina in Oakland, California, and he was born a twin. His twin sister's name was Tammy Jean. He was one of 5 children, and his father was facing, his real father was facing some financial trouble. So in order to, he basically kind of sold his kids to this man so that the kids could have insurance and other stuff like that. So the man listed on their birth certificate is not their real father. I'm not sure what ended up happening, but neither father was in their life. I don't know. But shortly after all of this, Nina decided to pack up the entire family and move from Oakland, California to St. Louis, Missouri. And when they were in Missouri, Tammy Jean and Tommy Lynn both ended up contracting meningitis. Unfortunately, Tammy would not survive this, and she ended up passing away at 18 months old. Tommy did survive the meningitis, so, you know, he was fine, unfortunately. And when Tommy was 3 years old, he was, I don't know why, but he was sent to live with his aunt, Bonnie. And After discovering that Bonnie was trying to adopt Tommy, Nina went and picked him back up 2 years later at the age of 5, and she returned him, back to the house with everyone else. And Tommy began drinking at the age of 7, and a year later, he was molested by an older man named Willis Clark, and his mom Nina knew about it, and she basically did not intervene whatsoever. So the abuse would continue, and Willis would like shower Tommy with gifts and take him on vacations with him and everything, all while still molesting him. I am not sure if it eventually progressed to sexual assault. All I know is that he was molesting him. Willis did eventually get arrested, not for molesting Tommy, but for he was arrested for raping another child. And so he ended up going to prison for it. But this still affected Tommy very greatly. He was not okay after this, of course. Why would anyone be? And he started using drugs at the age of 10. When Tommy was 13 years old, he was kicked out of the house after he stripped down to his birthday suit and got into the bed with his grandmother. It is unknown if he attempted to sexually assault his grandmother. All I know is he jumped in the bed with her. She started screaming, and following that, he was removed from the home. He did go to a juvenile detention center where he was evaluated and everything. And while he was in the detention center, Nina decided to pack up the entire family, and she moved. She left Tommy behind. He did not know that any of this was taking place until he was released. So when Tommy was released from the detention center and he returned home and discovered that his family was not there, he flew into a fit of rage and he pistol whipped a woman, but she did survive the attack. Following this, he decided to skip town and he started living as a drifter. He would train hop and go from just place to place, just trying to survive at this point. And during this, during this time, he alleged that he committed his first murder when he was 15. He says that he was breaking into a home and he witnessed the male homeowner performing oral sex on a young male boy. And he had flashbacks to when he was also being, molested by the older gentleman, Willis Clark. And he says that he shot the homeowner and fled the scene. But there's no record of any of this whatsoever. And this will end up becoming a recurring theme later on in the story. Tommy is sometimes compared to Henry Lee Lucas. If you don't know who Henry Lee Lucas is, he was a serial killer that probably wasn't even a serial killer. When Henry Lee Lucas was apprehended, he began to confess to crimes that either never took place, or he would try to take credit for crimes that were committed by other people. And that will be a very big thing with Tommy as well later on in the story. Side note, I don't know what it was during this time, but everybody wanted to be like the most prolific serial killer of all time. Like, they wanted to break other people's records for how many kills they had. This is not Call of Duty. This is real life. Like, what the hell is wrong with y'all? If you want to kill people, go to the military. They'll love that. But, girl. So Tommy is living his best life as a drifter. And on July 5th of 1979 is when he would commit his first known murder, I'll say. He was in Port Gibson, Mississippi, and he shot and killed a 39-year-old man named John Cade with a 32 caliber revolver. And following the murder of John Cade, he hopped on a train and he skipped town. And he would like travel all over the next maybe year and a half. And he ended up finding his way back to Oakland, where he's originally from. And while he was in Oakland, he ended up getting word that his mom, after she abandoned him, she relocated to Little Rock, Arkansas. So he decided to go find his mommy. And he went to Little Rock, where he was reunited with his family. And Nina was a bit hesitant on allowing him to come back into the house after the incident with the grandmother, but she eventually went ahead and just allowed him to live with them again, and this would prove to be a grave mistake. So Tommy's living with them for not even a year. He ended up moving back in with them in May of 1981, but he did not make it to May of 1982 because he was up to his old tricks again. This man stripped down to his birthday suit once again, and he attempted to join his mother Nina while she was in the shower, and he tried to rape her. So, of course, she calls the police, and when Tommy is arrested once again, he decides to decline receiving any type of mental health evaluation, mental health treatment, or anything like that. And baby, they should have did it anyway. I don't care. They should have did it anyway. Because obviously something is wrong with this man if he didn't try to sexually assault not only his mother, but his grandmother as well. So following Tommy's release this time, he starts to drink even heavier than he was drinking before, which led to him being arrested in 1982 for public intoxication and drunken disorderly conduct. And not long after this, he also shot a man named Hal Atkins with the same revolver that he used to murder John Cade. However, Hal would survive the shooting. Tommy was not apprehended or anything like that because he just decided to take advantage of being a drifter, and he would drift. Hello. After committing his crimes, he would just jump on the train and go to the next city as if nothing ever happened. So after the attempted murder of Hal Atkins, Tommy would go on to commit other petty crimes. He was arrested for theft, driving under the influence, and assault. But none of these crimes that he was committing gave him the same satisfaction as murder. So he just decided, I'm gonna stick with murder. On July 31st of 1983, Tommy relocated to St. Louis, Missouri, and when he was there, he attacked a 33-year-old woman named Colleen Gill and also her 4-year-old daughter, Tiffany Gill. He bludgeoned both of them with a baseball bat. I don't know why. Not that any reason would be justified, but he just did it. On July 26th of 1985, Tommy is now living in Springfield. Well, I'm not going to say living. He's now visiting Springfield, Missouri. And when he is there, he meets 28-year-old Ina Court. And they decide to go ahead and have a little bit of relations. So he comes back with her to her home and they do the do. And I'm not sure if Tommy is drunk or high and he passes out, or if he decides that he's spending the night and they talked about it beforehand. But Tommy falls asleep. And according to him, I just want to say, very big emphasis on according to him, when he woke up, came to, whatever you want to say, he said that Ina was stealing out of his pockets, which, sir, you poor. What the hell can she possibly steal from you? But whatever. So he jumps up in a fit of rage. He attacks Nina and he beats her up, and then he slits her throat. And as if that's not bad enough, Nina's 4-year-old child was also present at the house during this time. And out of fear that Rory, who's the child, would be a potential witness that could identify him, he decided to bludgeon Rory with a baseball bat, and then he fled and skipped town once again. On May 1st, 1987, he murdered 27-year-old Suzanne Corks. Her body was not found until September 5th of 1995, so almost 10 years later. October 15th of 1987, Tommy met 20-year-old Stephanie Stroh. He then proceeded to drug her with LSD. He strangled her, and then he encased her feet in concrete and dropped her into a desert hot spring. But this is one of those crimes that has not been confirmed because unfortunately they are unable to find Stephanie's body. So it's unknown if he actually did this or not. The next victim that I'm going to talk about is where a lot of the content warning that I gave in the beginning, that's where a lot of this is going to take place. I'll put a timestamp on the screen so that y'all can skip ahead because I will be going into detail with this one. I have to. And it's not, this is the hardest part. This is the hardest part of the case that I have to talk about. So I'll go ahead and put a timestamp so that y'all know where to skip forward if you don't want to hear this. Again, watch it at your own risk. I am so sorry, but it's bad. November 17th of 1987. Tommy is still drifting, and he is now hitchhiking. And he is in the city of Enna, Illinois, where he is picked up by 29-year-old Keith Darden and offered a ride. So after finding out that Tommy is homeless and he has nowhere to stay for the night, he decides that he wants to invite Tommy over to his house for dinner with his family, to which Tommy agrees. So they arrive at the Darden residence, and as soon as they get there, Tommy shoots Keith twice in the head, but Keith is still alive. He then goes into the Darden home and he attacks Keith's 3-year-old son, Peter, and he beats him to death with a baseball bat. I'm getting emotional, I'm sorry. After killing Peter, Tommy then attacks Keith's 30-year-old wife, Elaine, who is pregnant. And her beating is so severe that she goes into labor and she gives birth to their daughter, who they decided to name Casey. After Casey is born, this is so hard. After Casey is born, Tommy rapes Casey and then beats her to death with the same baseball bat he used to kill Peter. And then he continues his attack on Elaine. He rapes her, he mutilates her breasts, and then he And then he beats her to death with the same baseball bat he used on Peter and Casey. And when she's dead, he decides to take it a step further and he inserts the baseball bat into Elaine's vaginal canal and leaves it there. And when Elaine's body was found, the baseball bat was still in there. So now that everyone else in the house is dead, Tommy goes back outside where Keith is still in the car, and he drives him to just an open field, cuts off his penis, and shoots him for one last time in the head, dumps him in the field, takes his car, and continues traveling. September 11th, 1988, Tommy abducts 11-year-old Melissa Tremblay in Salem, New Hampshire. He rapes her, stabs her to death, and leaves her body on a railroad track. And Melissa's body was discovered the next morning in pieces after being ran over by a train. On December 18th of 1988, 51-year-old Kent Lawton is stabbed to death by Tommy in Tucson, Arizona. His body was discovered 2 days later. In 1990, Tommy was arrested for Grand Theft Auto in Wyoming and sentenced to 16 months in prison. During his prison sentence, he was evaluated by a forensic psychologist, and he was diagnosed with so many illnesses that I'm gonna have to refer to my notes. I'm sorry. So while he was in Wyoming in prison, he was evaluated and diagnosed with antisocial, schizoid, and borderline personality disorder, severe opioid, amphetamine, and alcohol dependency, major depression, and psychosis. Now, why they didn't think to put him into a mental health institution or anything like that, I have no idea, because obviously this man is a danger to society. But little did they know, he was doing more than just stealing trucks.
Thousands of tears later.
Okay, I'm back. I was crying, but we move. December 9th, 1991, in Marianna, Florida, Tommy attacked a 25-year-old woman, Teresa, and her 5-year-old daughter, Tiffany. And he bludgeoned both of them to death with a wooden table leg. He went on the run once again, and he was seen May 13th of 1992 panhandling by a 20-year-old woman, Fabian Weatherspoon. He was holding a sign that said, "Will work for food," and she kind of took pity on him, so she invited him to her home. And when they got to her house, she asked him to like stay outside, like she'll be right back. By the time she went to the kitchen to grab him something to eat and came back to the front door, Tommy was already in her house, even after she asked him to stay outside. So he's in the house, and she just kind of like brushed it off. So she's like watching him eat or whatever, and they're just like sitting there talking or whatever, I'm assuming. And she goes to retrieve something else from the bathroom, and this is when Tommy decides that he's going to attack her. So he follows her to the bathroom and he attempts to rape her in the bathroom, but sis was like, hell no, I'm not, you got the right one on the right day. And so she fights back. So when Tommy attacked her, he attacked her at knife point, and she ends up tussling with him over the knife. And her tussling is successful because she ends up getting the knife from him. She stabs him, and in the process of stabbing him, she ended up like nicking his kidney and his liver. And she also was able to cut one of his testicles. Like, she didn't cut it off, but like he had a slice on his testicle. And even though he was still, like, he didn't realize, before he started like losing all of his blood and everything, he still had the energy to like fight back. So he did end up getting the knife back from her, and he proceeded to stab her 18 times. But I guess she had like a lot of adrenaline in her system because she was still fighting. And because Tommy was getting aggravated at this point because he wasn't able to carry out the assault, he decided to, she had a piano in her house, and he walked over to the piano and he grabbed like the piano stool and he proceeded to beat her with it. And after she was unconscious, he went ahead and fled the scene. But by this time, his injuries started to get the best of him, and he ended up having to go to the hospital. Funny part is, when he went to the hospital, hello, she was stabbed 18 times and beat with a piano stool. So guess where she also had to go? The hospital. And when they asked her, like, about what happened, honestly, this was nothing but the Lord, because they ended up being in the same hospital. And in the same hospital, she was able to identify him as her attacker. So after he, got all the necessary procedures he needed done and he was recuperating and everything, that ass got arrested. This is where shit gets kind of fucked up. Now, they didn't charge him for the attempted rape, attempted murder, whatever. But because she was able to like fight him back, he was able to spin the story. And instead of him getting charged with the attempted rape and attempted murder and everything, he took a plea deal and he pled guilty to malicious wounding. And because he took the plea deal for malicious wounding instead of literally everything else, he was given a 5-year sentence. However, he only served 2 out of the 5 years, and they deemed him fit to be a part of society again. So after 2 years, he was released. It was during his prison sentence that he was also diagnosed with bipolar disorder, on top of everything else that he was also diagnosed with. And also while he was in prison, he ended up marrying a woman named Nona Price. So when he was released, he ended up relocating to Tennessee to live with Nona, but not long after they moved, he left sis. So that was that. I don't know if they actually got divorced or if they were just separated, but he left her and continued his life of crime. Now, after getting released from prison this time, Sir decided to kick it up a notch, and he definitely went into overdrive for sure. On October 13th of 1997, Tommy attacked 10-year-old Joel Kirkpatrick and stabbed him to death. And then he proceeded to sexually assault his mother, Julie Ray Harper, but she did survive the attack. And this incident took place in Lawrenceville, Illinois. And literally 2 days later, on October 15th of 1997, Tommy abducted 13-year-old Stephanie Mahaney in Springfield, Missouri. And he drugged her, raped her, and then strangled her. And her body was found on November 18th of 1997. On April 4th of 1999 in Gibson, Tennessee, Tommy raped and killed 31-year-old Deborah Harris, and he also stabbed her 8-year-old daughter, Ambria Halliburton, 3 times. On April 18th of 1999 in San Antonio, Texas, he abducted 9-year-old Mary Perez, and he raped her and strangled her with her own t-shirt. Her body was found 10 days later. Unfortunately, the exact same thing would happen to a 13-year-old girl by the name of Haley Mccone. My camera is about to die. I love that for me. Yay. So unfortunately, the same thing would happen to Haley Mccone, who was 13 years old in Lexington, Kentucky. He was arrested shortly after this on completely unrelated charges. I am not sure what those charges was. I'm not sure exactly what those charges were, and it is giving drag queen guy. So he was arrested on unrelated charges in Madison, Wisconsin. And during his little stay there, he assaulted another inmate. On July 5th of 1999 in Kingfisher, Oklahoma, Tommy abducted 14-year-old Bobby Lynn Wofford, one of those. He abducted her, he forced her to perform oral sex on him, and then he sodomized her, and he also shot her in the head. He decided to take her earrings as a trophy. Her body was found November 4th of 1999. On December 31st of 1999, 20 years of madness will finally come to an end. In Del Rio, Texas, Tommy ended up meeting a couple at a gas station, and the couple was headed out of town. I don't know how all of this came about, but he ended up finding out that they were headed out of town and that they were leaving their children home to be watched after by their cousin. So again, don't know how, but Tommy ended up finding out their home address. Like, I don't know how this shit happened, but he ended up getting the couple's home address. I guess he said he would drop in and check on them, make sure everything was okay. I don't know. But baby, people are too trusting. So however it happened, he ended up finding his way to the house, and he broke into the house with a 12-inch knife. Like, he used the knife to open the door, and he proceeds to go inside the home. So he goes into the first bedroom, and in the first bedroom there is a little boy who wakes up, and he tells his siblings to stop bothering him because he's trying to sleep. And Tommy begins to realize that the little boy is blind. So he just quietly closes the door and he proceeds to go to the next room. So he goes into the next room where 13-year-old Kayleen Harris and 10-year-old Crystal Searles are asleep in the bunk beds. And Kayleen is on the bottom bunk. And Tommy closes the door behind him and he gets into the bed with Kayleen, who is on the bottom bunk. So when he gets into the bed with her, she starts screaming, and her screaming wakes up 10-year-old Crystal, who is on the top bunk. So she gets down from the top bunk and she turns on the light, and when she turns on the light, they see that he is in there with the 12-inch knife, and they both start panicking. So they try to reach the door, but of course Tommy has the door blocked, and he grabs Crystal and he slits her throat, and then he proceeds to sexually assault Kayleen before he stabs her to death. So after he stabs Kayleen to death, he leaves the house. But little does he know that Crystal is still alive. He slit her throat, and when she laid down, she played dead until after he left. So she wasn't aware that the other people in the house were not harmed by him. So she holds her hand over her throat and she runs to the neighbor's house, which is, it was like kind of spaced out, but she runs to her neighbor's house and she gets them to telephone the police so that they can investigate the attack. And when they come in and they ask her questions and everything, She is able to give probably the greatest description of a person in history. And when the composite sketch is drawn up, it is spot on for Tommy. And he is instantly turned in, apprehended, arrested, everything. And finally, everything comes to an end. Finally. So Tommy was arrested on January 2nd of 2000. And he was identified during the lineup, and they went ahead and started booking him. So when they asked all of the information about like the potential suspects and everything, Tommy claimed that he had taken the lives of over 70 people. But when they started the investigation and they started asking him, you know, how did you do this, and this, some of the crimes that he was taking credit for, he actually committed. And then other crimes that he was taking credit for were either not committed by him, and they were able to tell because he was only giving details that were given to the public. So he was just taking credit for what someone else did. And some of the other crimes that he claimed that he had committed, they had no records of the disappearances of the people, like nothing. He was just fabricating stories. And it was very similar to that of Henry Lee Lucas. Henry Lee Lucas, they don't know how many people he allegedly murdered because he was taking credit for ones that he didn't commit. And I'm not sure if they do that to throw police off, or again, if they do it to become a prolific serial killer. I'm not sure, but it was the same for Tommy. They were not able to tell how many lives he took exactly. The ones that I was able to talk about earlier were the ones that were definitely confirmed as being him. And on September 18th of 2000, he was convicted of 18 or so murders. The part that really pissed me off is they were unable to charge him with the murders of the Darden family. They were unable to determine that he was the person that committed those murders. So again, he was not charged for them. On September 20th of 2000, Tommy was sentenced to death. Thank God. He was sentenced to death. Not life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was sentenced to die. And he was in Texas when this took place, which is the worst place to commit any crime. I don't know if y'all know how Texas get down, but Texas don't play. You commit a crime in Texas, your ass is gonna fry. So he was in the Huntsville prison in Texas, which if you get sent to Huntsville, you are definitely dying. Definitely. There's no doubt about it. What was this? The murders of, I don't know if y'all are familiar with the James Byrd case, but the people that were committed for the James Byrd case, one of them was sent to Huntsville. I think his name was Lawrence. Lawrence was sent to Huntsville. Lawrence was executed. He is very important in the Texas prison system for one very particular reason that I'm going to get into in a few minutes. When Lawrence was being executed and he received his last meal, he ordered a whole bunch of stuff and he did not eat anything. So because of that, the last meal is no longer a thing in Texas because of that. So Tommy was given the same thing that everybody else was given. He was given oatmeal and I think like scrambled eggs and bacon or whatever as his final meal. And they hauled that ass on down to be executed by lethal injection. And even on his deathbed, he still found a way to be an asshole, complete asshole. His execution date was on April 3rd of 2014. So this was fairly recent. So April 3rd of 2014 at 6:14 p.m. he was given that good old dose of pentobarbital, and this man decided that when they were executing him, he was gonna start snoring. He legit started snoring. And as if the Lord don't have a sense of humor, it took him 13 minutes to die. He was executed at 6:14 p.m. and it took him 13 minutes to die. He was pronounced dead at, did I say a.m.? I said p.m. He was pronounced dead at 6:27 p.m. and that was the end of the terrible cross-country killing spree and unfortunately the life of Tommy Lynn Sells. In November of 2015, a woman by the name of Melissa Deboer was watching the news, and they just so happened to be covering, well, not the news, but she was watching like one of those like Dateline true crime TV show things. And thank God she was, because she ended up coming across the episode of Tommy Lynn Sells. And when she looked at him, she instantly called the police because she realized that she had made a terrible mistake. Melissa's mom was actually one of Tommy's victims, and whenever she identified the person in the lineup, she didn't identify Tommy. She identified someone that resembled Tommy, and that man's name was Rodney Lincoln. So she contacted the police. She explained everything that happened, and Rodney Lincoln ended up getting, what's the word I'm looking for? He was released. I can't think of the actual term for it, but he was released. And unfortunately, he is not the only person that did go to jail because they were misidentified during the 20-year killing spree of Tommy Lynn Sells. They ended up doing a lot of other research and realizing that he was not the only person that was wrongfully imprisoned behind Tommy Lynn Sells' actions. And it did take them a while to kind of get everybody released. But Rodney is the only one that I actually know about. And he was released in 2018, given a full pardon by the governor and everything. So, you know, it's still awful because he still had to be in prison, but, you know. So, yeah, that's something good that came out of it, I guess. But, yes, that is the end of the case. And this was a hard one. It was a hard one, I'm not going to lie. Like, I thought that David Parker Ray was probably the worst person ever. And I was sadly mistaken when I started doing research on this case because it got worse and worse and worse before it got better. It, like, I didn't think it was that bad when I looked at, like, my first two sources. But when I looked at, like, my third and fourth source, I was like, oh my God, this is awful. Like, it was so bad. Like, it was terrible. And I don't think that there is a case out there that is worse than this one, honestly. Like, he just made my ass itch. Like, it's terrible. But I haven't seen much coverage about this case, and I really did want to cover it because I didn't know about it. And if I didn't know about it, I know that other people didn't know about it. Or they know about it because they did, they covered it on Criminal Minds. If you watch Criminal Minds, they did cover it, but of course it was a character that was played by, what is his name? It was a character that was played by, oh shit, he was in a Rocky Horror Picture Show. Tim, I'll put his name on the screen if I can find it. Tim, he was Dr. Frankenfurter. Y'all know who I'm talking about. Like, I can't think of what his name is right now, and my phone all the way over there, so I'm not going to get it. But yes, he portrayed a character that was inspired by Tommy Lynn Sells on a couple of episodes on Criminal Minds. So that is how I found out about him. But yeah, this this was a rough case for me to get through. It really was. Like, I had to pause the camera and cry for like 15 minutes because I just, like, the part that I asked y'all to skip, like, as soon as I finished that part, I had to cry a little bit because it was just awful. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you do have any case suggestions, please feel free to leave them either in the comments or shoot me a DM on Instagram. That's pretty much all I have to say. Do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you guys in my next video.